Good morning, hello, and welcome everybody to Water Anxiety Over Security, a talk show focused on distressed women in disaster-led placement, brought to you here today by Wodair and the W4W Foundation. My name is Haji Yacoubi. I am delighted to be your moderator for this session today. So whether you're here live with us in this room in Stockholm or whether you're joining us online, good day to you, and we're very happy to have you here. Now, we're going to be speaking about water anxiety over security. I mean, it's the foundation, and at the very core of it, it's important to say that water is more than just a resource, right? It's the backbone of stability. It's the backbone of well-being, health, safety, the future of our communities. However, we also know that, that when there is water scarcity or when its availability is insecure, that it's also the root cause for very fundamental and deep anxiety that people experience, and in particularly for women. And that is what we'll be diving deeper into in these next 20 minutes of this talk show. And here to do that with me, I am delighted to be joined by two experts in our midst. So very warm welcome to you. I'm delighted, first off, to be joined by Dr. Manzi Balbargava. You're the founder and director of W4W Foundation, the CEO of Wodair, and the national president of the Wiki Water Resource Council. It's very good to have you. Also joined here on my right side is Durga Das, the founder of Eronero and Wodair. It's also good to have you here in our midst. 20 minutes, it goes by very fast, but before we dive into that topic of water anxiety over security, and then specifically for women, if we sort of need to understand the typology of disasters that we're talking about when it comes to water anxiety, perhaps Manzi, could you tell us a little bit more about that? What sort of disasters are we talking about, and how does it sort of affect that sense of anxiety for people?
Yeah. Thank you, Hazar. Thanks for having us here, and also CV to have us here. You see, when we talk about disaster, we are naturally looking for natural disasters. You know, that's a natural way of talking about it. But when we are looking at disasters, we are categorizing it into man-made disasters and natural disasters. For example, landslides, floods, we call it natural disaster, but we also are going through war, communal violence, pandemics. These are humanly constructed disasters. So we will describe it like that, and then we look at the pattern of distress, whether they are similar in all kinds of natural and man-made disasters, or they are different. That's where we are exploring whether women face the similar issues and whether the relief work is similar or not.
Right, yeah. And I think what might be striking for people when we have this talk show is that we're specifically using the term water anxiety,
Yes.
right? I mean, typically we hear terms like water security, stability, all sorts of things. Why specifically anxiety? Could you elaborate?
Oh, that's a very good question, because when we talk about water anxiety, you know, the genesis of the word comes from medical terms, and it's about hydrophobia, so the fear of water.
Okay.
So we are extending that concept to look at the social and ecological aspect of it, and seeing the physical, psychological impact or the distress which people go through. And importantly, it's also for the haves and the have-nots. It's not that only vulnerable communities have water anxiety.
Right.
So it's also the affluent communities having the anxiety. You know, the fact that we are all sitting here is that we are in anxiety.
Right.
That there will be some problem because others are, half of the population is facing problem.
Yeah.
So it's the fear that we may not have access and availability of water.
Yeah.
The poor people, they face problem of access and affordability, but even for the haves, now we are thinking whether we will get water tomorrow or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. So
It's
what you say, not the haves and the have-nots, but everybody in a way is impacted by it.
Yes.
Indeed, everybody here in Stockholm, we as a global water community, we're gathered because we care about these issues, but also because there's a certain sense of anxiety.
Absolutely.
But how can you then help me better understand then why women specifically is such a pressing factor within this entire conversation of water anxiety?
Oh, that's, I think, fundamental when we look at water problems. Water has been a patriarchal problem, let me put it that way, globally.
Yeah.
And the impact of it is naturally goes to women, children, and even, I will say, senior citizens.
Yeah.
But when you do a project, you have to always delineate where you want to focus on. And focusing on women, it is now already said by UN, CV, WHO, all international bodies, think tanks, that focusing on women is focusing on family. So
Right.
anyway, it's an inclusive term, So that's why we focus. And anyway, they carry more burden.
Yeah.
And during disasters and displacements, they have extra burden. And biologically also, they have
Yeah.
more
Can you,
requirements.
can you just elaborate a bit on that burden? Because indeed you say water is a patriarchal issue at the core as well. Maybe just for people that might be hearing that for a first time, could you just briefly explain why that actually is the case?
Oh, I can tell from the professional part as well. Like
Yeah.
you see, we have 1 in 5 water professional, which is who is woman.
Yeah.
So anyway, and there are more men talking about water. But when
Right.
you look at the domestic side of it,
Yeah.
there may be not less than one man doing the domestic chores and
Right.
ensuring water for the family.
Fetching
So
water.
fetching
And
water,
yeah.
ensuring, and also the cost of fetching water comes to their health,
Yeah.
to their anxiety, to
Yeah.
their livelihood, and all those things are impacted.
Yeah.
Most of, like in India, if I give cases, there are serious problems when they go to fetch water. And for sanitation, we are talking about both water and sanitation.
Right.
All kinds of abuses happen with women. So
Yeah.
it's not only livelihood and leadership, but
Yeah.
more than that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I love how you bring in that sort of gender lens that is needed in that discussion as well. Durga, if I can go to you, I think Mamsi has very clearly displayed how important it is that we take water anxiety into account. If we don't, what would the risk be? And I think specifically also when we look at it from a socio-economic sort of implication, what would the risk be if we don't take water anxiety into
If we
account?
don't address water anxiety, and I know it's a new word and a new concept, but if we don't address it, I think there's a far-reaching, deeper consequence over time and future, not just on the women, but the family and the community at large. I think it's not just physical, it's psychological as well.
Right.
And I think mental illness is an outcome of this. So I think if we don't address anxiety at the critical juncture of during disasters and post disasters, I
Right.
think we're asking for a deeper health related issue.
Right. And from a socio-economic perspective?
It also makes, see, women are the custodians of water. So when when disasters happen,
Yeah.
they have to make a choice whether they're going to go after livelihood or they're going to find water. So naturally, the tendency is to go find water for the family.
Because it's such a fundamental
Exactly.
basic
And when they
necessity.
travel to find water, there's also potential violence along the path.
Right, yeah.
So I think it has an economic problem as well
Yeah.
that will happen if we don't address the disaster.
Right, at the very core. So, okay, I think we've sort of established that it's so imperative that we don't neglect water anxiety, the implications of it, socioeconomically, for women, safety. Now, if we get into the nitty gritty, if we talk about sort of the approaching this issue effectively, I know that that the both of you are involved with a lot of studies surrounding this topic. You've delved into it deeper. Maybe Mansi, if I can start with you, could you tell us just a bit more about if people want to understand this issue and dive into it better, what's like the general approach to effectively, look at what water anxiety as a whole, to evaluate it, to monitor it?
Yeah, interesting. First of all, I want to put a disclaimer here that both of us are not water anxiety expert.
Yeah.
We have come to the World Water Week to really start the co-learning process and make a discourse on water anxiety, that it has to be at the center of water security. The fact that we are not attaining water security is because the half of the water security issue is water anxiety, more than half rather. So we are not reaching there. So what we are trying to do in our project is a very nascent stage, and even the NGO Water is also at a nascent stage. So it's our first project which we have conceptualized at a global scale. So we really wish to understand what is water anxiety and how it can be factored into the health aspect, how it can be factored into the water security aspect, and where can the investment go in water anxiety, where can the research and development go, and
Right.
how it can be taken together. So we are really trying to co-learn in the process from the different case studies which we have chosen across the world, but importantly to see whether different disasters are having different kinds of water anxiety, or it is similar, or because natural disasters have different kind of implications, and humanly constructed disasters have different implications. So
Right.
whether the psychology is same amongst women, the fear is similar,
Yeah.
and if yes, what kind of relief work we are producing right now, whether we are giving it or not, because I know a lot of physical relief is in the agenda.
Right.
But are psychological relief in the agenda or not? And we are trying to read across literature.
Yeah. Are
And we
they actually, if I can ask you that question?
a few, yes.
Yeah.
And also, I think the corona made a huge difference in the way to have this emergence of understanding of mental well-being. And from this mental well-being, we are taking out the literature on water, and we are talking about the water anxiety, you know.
Right.
So it's about other aspects also, but
Yeah.
you see, if you read WHO, if you read UN now, you see that the anxiety is much higher than ever before in
Yeah.
human civilization now,
Yeah.
for many other things
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
But we are focusing on water
Yeah.
here.
And you say that that psychological relief, that is something
Yes.
that it's happening slowly, especially after COVID. We have
Yeah.
more openness to it, but it's not at a
Absolutely.
sufficient level.
It has not yet reached the center, or I will say nuclei of the water security issue.
Right.
If technologies could solve, we would have already solved water security issue,
Right.
because there is enough water in the planet. You
yeah.
know, so there is something more than science and technology which we are missing.
Yeah.
You know, and that's emotions.
Right.
You know, that's a spirituality about water. So people want to be heard about water. You know.
So, just quickly, because I can imagine that people hear that and that it resonates with a lot of people, but then to sort of visualize what that could look like very concretely, do you have any examples that you know?
Yes, we do. So we recently actually completed one of our research with, I think I must now at this point also acknowledge two of our senior research fellows, Garbit Nayak and Shromona Burman, who have been really working hard.
Yeah.
So both have developed a huge body of literature on anxiety,
Yeah.
and specifically water anxiety. And Shromona recently completed her master's thesis on water anxiety in Kalimpong, Rongpo, which is in West Bengal, India, and she did field work in the riverbed where everything is demolished, all the houses are underneath the riverbed, and then she met this Resi community, and she really learned how communities, especially women, how they come together and build resilience around each other.
Right.
But the cry was that nobody is hearing them. You know, so they can manage their everyday house and water, and you know, they can manage little livelihoods here and there.
Yeah.
But for the long run, they are waiting for someone or healers or leaders to listen to them.
Right. So that's really about community engagement as a key pillar in that.
Yes.
Maybe Durga, if you could touch upon that, because it's actually quite interesting when we talk about water anxiety and the people affected by this. How would you say that community engagement can sort of be ensured as a part of that process?
I think we need to take understanding into action, right? And I think part of that is women empowerment, taking women into leadership positions in the community, finding solutions that are community-driven and yet sustainable. Like Mansi just mentioned, well, what we understand from Shromona is when the disaster happened, they implemented technology, right? But soon after that, technology gets washed away with the next disaster. So it's not sustainable. So unless we find community to get involved in the implementation of technology, also address their mental anxiety and find a long-term solution, I think technology will not sustain, will not last, and therefore the distress that goes along with water anxiety will never be taken away.
And how do we do that? How do we ensure it?
I think it's, first of all, women are the custodians of water, right? So you have to get them engaged. And when you get them engaged in the implementation of technology, in the management of their water bodies, right, then automatically they're going to ensure that that water anxiety that follows disaster is not met, right? And I think if we empower them into leadership positions, while we say it's patriarchal, I think obviously water is now matriarchal because we are the custodians of water. So I think getting them engaged at the grassroots level is what will find long-term solutions.
I like that. So it's about representation in those places of decision making as well. As you mentioned also earlier by the stats, you know, how many people are working within sort of this systemic policy addressing of the issues of water, and then how many people are at the very ground responsible for fetching it, for, you know, making sure that that livelihood and that resource is available. So now I think if we are to dive into some examples, some case studies that you've done, you mentioned earlier the senior research colleagues that you have that have been diving into some of those cases a bit more. What are some of the lessons that we've learned there so far? If you could share some examples of case studies, maybe if I start with you, Mansi.
So I was mentioning mentioning about Rangpo in Kalimpong, West Bengal. When she met people, they are really regularly meeting and discussing what to do next. And the fact that they are aware, it's a GLOF, so glacial outburst lake flood. So it's the fact that they are knowing that it is a recurring activity.
Right.
They are also strategizing themselves from the local side. But I think what they are missing is the top-down policy and investment on it. So the sustainability is only going to happen when there is a bottom-up resilience building as well as the top-down policy and investment and the marriage of both. And I think that marriage is required, and that marriage can only happen when we who are working on water sector, we are understanding and acknowledging and appreciating the women who are strategizing these local solutions. So we don't have to go with a big solution to them. It's just that we have to listen to them, find out how can we acknowledge and appreciate them, keep their morale up so that they can continue doing it and facilitate some kind of partnership at the global level to local level. They are really seeking some partnership where they can know that, okay, tomorrow also there will be water if there is a disaster.
Right.
That's what they are looking at.
Yeah.
For example, I'm just after this, the day after tomorrow, I'm heading to Manipur, which is we have taken as a case study for humanly constructed disaster. We are going through communal violence, serious problem for last 15 months now. So we go and there are more than 60,000 people living in relief camps. So serious problem again, domestic violence and all kinds of even communal violence there. So we will see how women are still managing to get water for their family, even within the tent, And it's not only for their own family. If my fellow woman is unable to go today for some biological reason, pregnancy, menstruation, menopause, the other women are ensuring that the family gets water. So I think as people who are not really facing the anxiety and insecurity, we have to learn those tricks. See, in urban areas, I don't even know my neighbor. So how will I build a community resilience? So I think this is a co-learning which we have to learn from them, the community resilience, and we have to offer them some kind of, mental security that we will make sure that there will be some water for you when there's a problem.
To tackle that anxiety,
So
but
it's a two-way process.
It is, and it's beautiful how you describe that solidarity also that is so present, within the context. Durga, if I can go to you, what are some other areas and disasters?
So we looked at Acapulco when we had that Hurricane Otis, and we looked at implementing technology there, but also empowering women. So one of the technologies we looked at and what I work with is making water from air. So we looked at giving them implementation of machines that can then get water from air, but allowing the women to manage that water. So they can also not just provide for themselves and the community, but also maybe sell it and create a livelihood around it. So that's one of the things we looked at in Mexico.
Yeah, that's amazing. And any sort of like lessons that you took away from that you think are valuable to know?
So when we talk technology, for some reason we always think that it's a man's world, right? So when we implement technology, wherever it is, it's the men who tend to look after that, the technology or the innovation or the maintenance of it. But in this case, we've realized that it's the women that we want to engage with. And it's not hard. I think the technology solutions that we are looking at implementing are easily managed by women. And it also empowers them because they now are in control of the water that they're normally in search of. And they are probably going to be better judges of how to use that money that they get out of this livelihood than men.
Because they are at the forefront
exactly.
of
and so they take very good care of it. So I think getting women involved with our technology is an important
vital to that. We're almost approaching the end of this talk show. That's how fast it goes when you're learning new things. But before we do leave, I do want to ask you this final question, and that is really, we'll be walking out of this session here later on, whether you're here in Stockholm or you're listening online. What is like one message that you hope that people take away from them? If you could very briefly, Durga.
I think, just like Mansi mentioned some time ago, we look at vulnerable communities and think we feel sorry or we think we're offering them a solution. Actually, in hindsight, with what we've learned in Rangpo, we realize that the resilience that they have learned is something that we could be better educated by. So I think it's not a question of the affluent or the vulnerable. It's a win-win and a learn-learn situation.
I love that. Mansi?
Yeah, I think we are also looking forward to go to Nepal for looking at the earthquake case study, and I think Nepal is a classic example where they have showcased the recurring disasters and resilience. They rebuild the whole community, the settlement very quickly. I think for me, the major takeaway and the co-learning which I'm looking forward at the World Water Week, and I really invite all of you to engage in this conversation and bring water anxiety at the center of security if we really want to talk about security.
Yeah.
And two things which we would like to work on is policy and investment from the top. When I say top, it's literally not the top, but those who can or the haves, and learning or acknowledging, documenting. So I'm looking at a lot of research and development and education, engaging the youth to go to those areas, feel feel connected, and then bring those learning to the classrooms, to the research and science, and then look for large-scale corporations and organizations to help them out.
Okay, I love that so much. I have nothing to add to that other than a big thank you to you for sharing that, and a big thank you for everyone here joining us. If you're joining online, thank you so much, and let's spread the word
Thank you, Hajar,
forward.
for having us.
Thank you, Hajar. Thanks a lot. And I wish to thank also two of our researchers, Garbit Nayak and Shramona, for making this possible for us to talk about it, to be honest. Thanks
Thank
a
you so
lot,
much.
guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.